Rochester movie critic Jack Garner picked a movie called The Company Men as one of his best of 2010, and he's probably upset it got overlooked in the Oscar nominations. Now, you can judge for yourself. It opens in Rochester at the Little this Friday. Ben Affleck plays a laid-off executive. The movie was written and directed by John Wells, a veteran producer of TV shows including ER and The West Wing. Norma Holland talked to him about The Company Men.
It's a great time of year to go to the movies, really is. And of course, we're talking all about The Company Men. You know, this movie is so interesting because it's a slice of life. I know that it takes a look at the way people deal with the recession. But it's not a recession movie, though, from what I'm reading, right, John? It's not meant to be just that.
No, it's not really meant to be just about the recession. It's meant to be about how we as Americans deal with hard times, how families come together, what we do, you know, no matter how difficult these times are, you know, who comes to your aid, you know, who brings you back up, where do you find your support. And it is ultimately a hopeful film about how, as difficult as these times are for many families and as much as they're having to go through economically, that on the other side of it there is something, you do come out of it, you survive. You survive with many things intact, and oftentimes you survive with understanding that your family loves you more and thinks more of you than you thought going in, that you mean more to everyone around you than just your job.
Yeah, but you know, when you look at the jobs that the characters in this movie have, so much about their jobs seems to identify who these men are. These are high-powered jobs, you know, with all the trappings of success, you know, the golf, the rounds of golf, the Porsche, you know, all that stuff. It's very easy to kind of fall into the belief that I am my job, especially when my job gives me so many perks.
Yeah, and in this country, much more so than most other countries, we identify with our jobs. This is the first thing that people ask you is, what do you do?
Yeah.
Which is considered to be rude in most of the rest of the world.
Is it really?
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, and it's just fodder for conversation in our country.
Yeah, and it's meant as a way to find out kind of where you are in the class system. I mean, we do have a system in which some people want to be perceived based on what they do and what they own, and the film in large part is about who are we when we don't have those things, and particularly for men who've done everything that they thought was they were supposed to do to succeed. You know, finish college, many times get postgraduate degrees, buy the house they're supposed to buy the car they're supposed to buy, do all the things that they thought they were supposed to do to sort of achieve the American dream. When you lose the income that allows you to maintain that, who are you? And the film is really talking about we don't need all those things. These are very painful times that we're going through. And yet at the same time, there is something at the end which is almost more valuable, that understanding that you are going to survive, that you're stronger than you think you are, that there are people around you who love and care about you and will support you.
Yeah, and no matter what your job title is. Now, you actually got the inspiration to write this story in the recession that happened in the 90s, the early 90s, right?
No, that's a little incorrect in some of the press materials. I apologize. It was more around the dot-com time. And
so the early 2000s, late 90s.
Yeah, and it's
the late, like 1999-ish.
10 years ago, 12 years ago, 11 years ago. And it came from, it's not his story, but my brother-in-law, you know, very well educated, successful man, lost his job in a big corporate merger along with 5,000 other people on a Tuesday, and found himself out in the world in a way that he didn't expect to, and started telling me what he was going through. And that led me to a number of websites where I put up a little thing just saying I was a writer who was interested in downsizing and what people were going through. And in the first week, I got over 2,000 responses, and followed that up with a number of phone calls, spoke to probably another couple of hundred people, and discovered that there was this whole, what at the time was sort of an underground thing that was happening where lots of people were going through it. And there was a shame attached to it, this feeling that no matter how much they realized it had nothing to do with them, what had happened to them, that somehow they felt it was their fault, that they'd done something wrong. And I spoke to all these people and got their stories and realized there was something there. And then over a couple of years decided I didn't quite have it right, went back, did some more interviews, and then changed it substantially in the 2007-2008 economic downturn.
Did you ever think that you would be seeing the same thing 10 years later?
You know, we have had these cycles of recession throughout our history. It's not new. The thing that's new this time is that usually it used to affect 5 million workers and seemed to be a little underground, and you could pretend it wasn't going to happen to you. Now it's very difficult to find a family that doesn't have someone in their family or a close friend who's being affected by this.
And more with director John Wells coming up in our next half hour. The Company Men opens Friday at the Little Theater.
All right, now we have some more of our interview with writer-director John Wells. His movie, The Company Men, about corporate downsizing, opens this week at the Little Theater. We're going to go back to where we left off in his conversation with Norma Holland.
Let me ask you a question. You wrote the story about men, okay? The Company Men, of course, the title. What if you had written this about women? How many women did you say you spoke to in researching the
I spoke to a great many women, and there are some very strong female parts in the picture because of that. But I became fascinated with the men who seemed to lose their identity because they identified so strongly with their jobs. And the women that I spoke to, as angry as they were or frustrated they were by the experience, they had larger support groups they had created for themselves, and they weathered it much more easily. Not to say that it's not economically difficult,
right?
But they didn't lose sense of themselves in the middle of it. And the film is about men who have so identified with their jobs that the losing of that job means that they don't know who they are. They don't know how to find themselves. So I became fascinated with that in the people that I spoke to, and that's why I focused on it in the film.
That's amazing that you not only wrote a story that that you were able to create a movie out of and have these characters with such depth, but that you truly understand the social issue behind it. That must be really gratifying for you on many levels.
Well, it's you talk to people, and when you do the research and you hear some of these stories, one of the things that I was really struck with was this remarkable resiliency that people brought to it, the sense of humor and integrity and dignity, and a lot of self-deprecating humor and stories about themselves and how ridiculous they felt about what they were actually feeling and going through. And I really wanted to get that across in the film. It's one of the great things about the American character is that we do pick ourselves up and we move on with our lives and we depend upon other people to do it in our communities. And that, I think, is the thing that hasn't been celebrated enough in what's been going on in this economic downturn. It is a whole group of people, it may end up being a quarter of our population, which ends up having to completely redefine their lives. And it takes all these different pockets, people are losing their homes, people are losing their jobs, people are having to completely redo their credit. And I think it's one of those seminal events like the Depression was for my parents.
Sure.
That changes all of our attitudes towards the way in which we choose to live going forward.
Wonderful commentary. I have to say it's social commentary as well as entertainment. Nice to see entertainment have that vein of social commentary through it, and maybe a lesson for all of us. So the entertainment actually becomes a lesson in and of itself. John Wells, it was really a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much for making this movie, and best of luck to you in the future. I know you've got a lot of projects and a lot of shows you're working on, including Southland. So we thank you so very much, sir.
Thank you. It's great talking to you.